morning and good afternoon, everybody, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Changemakers Bite Size. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce John Quirk, an award-winning author, to run his session, Defining Behaviours That Matter. So, John, over to you.
Thanks, Jordan, and hello, everybody. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about subjects very close to my own heart. So I'm here to talk to you about defining behaviors that matter. And I will speak about this idea of a double click. So a double click in relation to a behavior and the result that we were looking for. So again, I'll explain what I mean as we go through the slides, and hopefully that will be of some value to you. So again, as I mentioned, I'm from SA Partners, and we have a great website, so you can find out more about us if you want to. And again, I do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. So again, not too hard to find if you want to follow up on this. So without further ado, I'm just going to get stuck into the presentation because we don't have a whole lot of time together. So in many organizations, we see a lot of talk about culture and values, but what we don't see is an understanding of what that really means and how it impacts the organization. And also we see that this idea of culture and values, it's left with the HR function. So it becomes their role to implement, support, train people, deploy this idea of culture and values. And they tend to sometimes be working upstream against the general flow of, oh, we're busy, we're trying to do this, that, and the other. So it's a tough old space to be. Equally, then, we also see organizations whose culture and behavior that they speak to is often about, it's almost like a marketing activity. It's reflected outside the business rather than what does it actually mean to us inside the business. So what do we really mean when we talk about culture and values within an organization? And yes, it is about having a nice and engaging workplace, but it is so much more than that. And that's what I want to try and talk to you about in these few minutes we have together. So when myself and my colleagues visit organizations around the world, you know, we have meetings, we attend tier meetings, we go down on the shop floor, we go into offices. But very quickly, we begin to get a sense or a feel of the culture of the organization. And really what we're doing is we're listening and seeing. So we're seeing behaviors, we're hearing conversations, we're seeing stuff happen on the shop floor and the front line. And it's those expressions of behaviors that we observe and those that we hear create that culture that we sense. And again, many organizations miss the fact that a lot of the behaviors that we are driven by as individuals are a result of this legacy hangover from the way we've developed as humans. So our brains and our physiology is more or less the same as we had about 100,000 years ago when we were in our tribal hunter-gatherer environment. So those behaviors and that physiology is still very much part of us today. And that has an unbelievable impact on how we act and how we behave. And it's also an area that we need to tune into if we're going to begin to focus on this idea of ideal culture and aspired for behavior with our organization. So what does that mean? So in really, really simple terms, I've broken this down into what I call the 4 key evolutionary hangovers. So the first one is this idea of how we're influenced by our tribe. So again, as hunter-gatherers, we lived in a small community. We had to remain in that community, or else if we were tossed out on our own, we may not survive too long. So I'm going to explain each of these in a bit of detail over the next few slides. The second one then is this idea of how our brain works. So our brain is a very hungry, energy-intensive organ in our body. And that means it works very efficiently at how it conserves energy. And that has impacts of things in what we see and what we understand. And the other one, which is probably we're very familiar with, is this idea of how we respond to stress. We hear a lot of talk about, overstressed, the impact on their body. And again, let's think that when we get to it, around the impact of that within our organizations. And the fourth one is this idea that who we trust and why we trust them. And why is that there? And again, what is the impact of that within our organizations? So these four top level, if you like, evolutionary hangovers that I think we really need to focus on if we're talking about developing and responding to this idea of ideal behaviors and a culture in our organization. So the first one, being influenced by a tribe. So when I'm working with organizations to help them in this space, I use a lot of videos and I use a lot of examples. And one of the ones I really, really rely on is this research done by Solomon Asch in the 50s and 60s around peer pressure and how group pressure can really influence how people behave and what they say. So in this, again, you can find this on YouTube, or as a friend says, on the interweb, to have a look at it yourself. And in this experiment, basically, because of the influence of the group, an individual denies the evidence that's right in front of them and gives the wrong answer, even though they know it's the wrong answer. And when these people are interviewed after this experiment, it's done many, many times, it's been repeated in many, many different forms. You can go onto the YouTube and you can see lots of different examples of this in action. But they explain away reasons why they gave the wrong answer. Maybe I didn't understand the experiment, or I thought I was seeing it wrong, or whatever. But yet, fundamentally, the pressure within the tribe forced this individual to give a wrong answer, even though they knew it was wrong. Hugely powerful influence. And think about that working in our organizations. The second one, and again, I'm not going to talk too much about this one. I want you to go and see this video. So look for the selective attention test. If you've seen it before, great. If you haven't, I want you to focus on the number of times the people in the white tops pass the basketball to each other. You can focus on that, contact me, give me your answer, and let me know if something else pops up. And again, I'll let you find this video yourself, but this is critically important to understand how we perceive and how our brain becomes focused on tasks, and we have this thing called inattentional blindness. But again, you spot those basketballs and you let me know your answer. And if you do contact me, I'll tell you another really, really important message behind this video. But again, this is fundamentally around what we see and what we don't see. The third one, again, is I call it our two-brain dilemma. So under stressful situations, there's immediate direct physiological responses in our body. Blood goes to different directions. If we're stressed, it was a survival instinct. If we heard a rustle in the bushes, the whole tribe are gone. It's nobody's hanging around saying, "Oh, I wonder what that is." We just hear a rustle and we're gone. So we're programmed to react to stressful environment. And again, that has influences in how we think and how we behave. And very simply, we talk about this idea of our red brain, where we're in that stressful zone. We're in a threat response. We've weaker control of our thoughts and our actions. It's survival instinct. We have the helmet on. It's not a good place. And certainly if we're in that for a long period of time, damage gets done. So we hurt ourselves, we hurt our psychologically and also physically. And then equally, when we're in our green brain, as we call it, this is the higher levels of our brain where we can talk, we can problem solve, we can interact, we can innovate. That's where we're most human. And yet myself and my colleagues enter organizations where we see a lot of red brain stuff going on, and we don't see enough green brain stuff going on. But again, we are hardwired to have a survival instinct that under stress, we behave a certain way. And the fourth one, which I think is really profound implications for organizations, is this idea of who we trust and why we trust them. So again, in reading and researching this for a book we published last year, um, this was really an insight for me. You suspect it, this goes on, but the fact that this is actually a survival mechanism. So in our tribal environment, we relied on our leader for survival. The leader made decisions. They deployed justice. They helped people sort out squabbles or divided resources or whatever. But we either trusted or mistrusted our leader. If we mistrusted our leader, well, then that's potentially a risk to ourselves and our family. So we are hardwired to mistrust our leaders. And the only way we trust them is through what we see them doing and how we see that, and what we see them saying and how balanced that is across the whole tribe. So if we see a leader behaving a certain way with one side of the group and a different way with others, that creates mistrust. If we see our leader and we're all talking about, oh, we're going to go over the hill there, we're going to find this food, we're going to slay the mammoths or whatever we're having for breakfast that day, and we're marching off with our gear, and we look behind us and the leader is still sitting by the fire all nice and cozy, that's not a good look. So we only trust our leaders by the matching of what they say and their intent by what they actually do and what we see them doing. Now, again, for me and my team, that has profound implications when we talk about things like, what we do in Leader Standard work. What do we do when we go see? Do leaders understand the impact of their language and how they speak to people on how those people feel and then subsequently how they behave? Because all of that is measuring what a leader is saying and what they actually do. But we are hardwired to mistrust our leaders. So we, as leaders, then we must make sure that we win that trust by being clear about what we say, and that's backed up by what we do. So why is this all important? It's important because your results in your organization depend on the expression of a behavior. So an employee deciding that they will put their hand up and say, there's something funny over here, we may need to investigate it, or not, or ignoring it. It may be a customer interaction where a sales agent is not really listening to what the customer is saying, and then there's a miscommunication that creates all sorts of noise and mess in relation to customer relations perspective. Or again, it could be how a leader speaks to people. But your results depend on that winning or losing behavior, the expression of that behavior at that frontline level that is going to make the difference between winning and losing. And yet we have all this evolutionary legacy working against us. So our default, unfortunately, is to go to the negative side of it rather than the positive side of it. Yet we can see how, if our tribe is aligned, doing the right thing, pushing the boundaries, feeling good about what they're doing, well, I'll step into that. I will play that role. I want to be part of it. But if my tribe is working against what I believe is right, that's not a good space, and that creates stress and all the other things that follow subsequently for that. So these evolutionary behaviors have a real impact on our ability to see the winning behaviors that we want to see within our organizations. And again, that winning behavior accumulates to give us that organizational culture that we seek and aspire to in what we do. So how do we begin to figure this out? So again, we often hear people talk about this ideal behavior. Okay, there's a point to that, but sometimes it's hard to get people to talk about ideal behavior. And what I find works much better is that if we get people in a room, we get them in a safe place, and we're talking about the work that we do, we say, okay, this is what we have to do. These are results we're looking for. What are the not ideal behaviors that either happen intentionally or sometimes unintentionally. I don't even know what's happening, but they make it harder for us to do what we need to do. And they impact things like cost, or ability to do improvement, or innovation, or customer experience, or engagement, or employee retention, all those things. What are those negative behaviors that are happening today that impact that? And if you have that group in the right place, they'll put that all on the wall for you. We'll be able to group them, and we say clearly, we get indications of what are the behaviors, the not ideal behaviors that are happening today that make us harder to do what we need to do. It could be as simple as, when I get this report, there's always errors in it. So obviously somebody isn't checking the data correctly. It could be something like, the operator hasn't got the tool they need at the right time. So somebody hasn't put the tool back in the right place. All those are expressions of behaviors. Equally, if we see the same problem occurring again, and supposedly we have got root cause analysis and we've done all the things, but yet the same problem pops up again, that's not an ideal behavior. So we can talk about those things, and we get people to express these behaviors to us and talk about them. So the skill is, once we have our list of not ideal behaviors, this is the stuff that stops us doing the things we need to do. Direct impact on outcome, a double click. If this behavior happens within 2 clicks, we're going to impact the business negatively. So once we have our list, we can do the judo flip on us. Okay, if they're the negative behaviors, what are the ideal behaviors? What are the behaviors we need? And that's when you stop talking, because you need to let the team define those behaviors for themselves. These are the behaviors we need. You can encourage. So how might we get a handle on that? So if somebody's not putting the thing back where it needs to be in place, maybe we should start measuring that for a while, make sure everybody knows about it, but we just measure it for a while, make sure it happens, because I need that tool there, because if it's not there, I can't do my work and I get delayed, and yada, yada, yada. We have an impact on the business. So you need to let the team define the behaviors that they need in their environment to do what they need to do. And when I say that to organizations, they go white and pale, and some people fall over, and then you have to pick them up and put them back on the chair again, because they say, oh, well, that means we're going to have thousands of behaviors everywhere. Yes, we will. But they'll be the right behaviors, and they'll be defined by the team. And your skill will be how you then guide those behaviors into some high-level values. You give them frameworks by which they can define their behaviors, but it's owned by them. You cannot tell people how to behave, because that's an adult-child conversation. You let the adults define the behaviors they need to have a successful day, the behaviors that they need, because if it don't happen within 2 clicks, click, we'll have an impact on what we're trying to do here in this office, in this department, in this cell, etc., etc., etc. So again, because it comes down to this key point, we can talk about values and cultures and stuff at a leadership and middle management level till the cows come home, but it has no real impact until we understand what those look like at that frontline level, the atomic micro behaviors that make the difference between winning or losing. And the question then becomes, is our workplace, the way we've got it set up, the procedures that we have in place, the systems, are they enabling or disabling those desired behaviors? Because we can't have people working against the system. We must have the system supporting people in the behaviors they want. Sounds simple, but that's what we need to do. So again, how can you think about this in your own organizations today? Remember that point about who we trust and why we trust them. If you're a leader who's out there spouting on about the values and principles and stuff in your organization and the culture you're trying to achieve, and yet you say that and you look over your shoulder and that conversation is completely misaligned with what's actually happening in the workplace, or do the values and culture you look for, does it actually relate to the work that we do, or is it something that we use for marketing outside? If you see that disconnect, you need to sort it out pretty quickly. And again, what do you see on the front line? What are those critically important behaviors that you need to see at your frontline teams, which must be supported by your supervisors and managers to make sure they're happening at the right time, in the right place, when they need to happen? What are they? What do they look like? And then again, you can't tell people how to do that. You just need to ask, what do we need? How can we make sure that behavior is going to happen more often than not? And again, really look hard at your processes and systems. Are we making it hard for people to do the right thing? Is our workplace actually working against people to express the behaviors we look for? So 3 little checks to keep you honest when you start talking about culture and behavior in your organizations. But this is important stuff. And I see many organizations waste a lot of time talking about culture and values and behaviors, and they haven't made this connection. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you want to find out more about this, we have published this book recently, Deep Excellence. It talks a lot about this stuff in the book itself. You're more than welcome to reach out to me directly at john.quirk@sapartners.com. Tell me how many basketballs you counted, and we'll have a discussion about what else might have been going on in that video. Seek out those videos and use them yourself to convince yourself of the importance of our focus on this frontline ideal behaviors that result in the give us the result we're looking for in what we're trying to do. So you take care of yourself and give me a shout if you need any further information. Thank you, and thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, John. Another great Changemakers bite-sized session. Just a reminder that this continues. We're getting to the business end of Changemakers bite-sized now, with only a few sessions left. So next week we welcome Robin Jacks on a purpose-driven strategy. And I hope to see everybody there. And once again, thank you, John.
Thanks very much, Jordan. Thank you. Take care, everybody. Take care.